During Donald Trump's return to Capitol Hill this week, the disgraced former president pulled a familiar yet sleazy tactic, criticizing a Democrat-led city that didn't vote for him. While meeting with GOP lawmakers, Trump reportedly made disparaging comments about Milwaukee, saying it is a, quote, horrible city. Now remember, the RNC plans to hold its convention in Milwaukee just this summer, where Trump is likely going to clinch the GOP presidential nomination. President Biden did not miss this chance to troll Donald Trump and push back on him almost immediately, tweeting, "I happen to love Milwaukee." The DNC also put up billboards in the Milwaukee area spotlighting Trump's comments. Milwaukee's Democratic Mayor Cavalier Johnson defended his home turf in a conversation with Reverend Al Sharpton during Politics Nation just in the last hour. Let's take a listen.
To insult the city that's hosting your national convention with groups that you're trying to make inroads in, and groups like Republicans who you lost many of to Ambassador Haley, I just don't think it's a smart political strategy.
Donald Trump has claimed that he was talking about Milwaukee's rising crime rate, but the numbers, the math, it just doesn't math. FBI data shows instances of violent crime in Milwaukee have actually fallen during the Biden administration, with fewer than 8,500 reported offenses in 2022. Sure looks like to me that Donald Trump is doing something else that he does really well: gaslighting the public. Joining me to unpack all of this is Amicia Cross, a Democratic strategist and former advisor to the Obama campaign, and Rina Shah, who is a political strategist and a former senior GOP congressional advisor. Good evening to you both. Amicia, I want to start with you. We have basically seen Donald Trump use this playbook before. We know that he's going to disparage certain cities and that most of those cities are going to be Democrat-led. But it's another element here because most of those cities also have non-white mayors. I'm sure this is not a coincidence, but you can certainly prove me wrong if you think otherwise.
You took the words right out of my mouth. It's not just that they're Democrat run, it's that they're black run as well. The same ire that we've seen Donald Trump have for Milwaukee, he has for my home city, the one that I'm in right now, Chicago. He consistently is saying things that are not true, that are not factual in the least bit. When he talked about rising crime and violence, crime in Milwaukee has been on the downturn for now upwards of 4 years. And this year alone has seen the most sizable decrease that they've seen in crime in the past 2 decades. So I think that there's a lot of lies that he likes to propagate, but he also likes to attack cities that are urban centers and cities that are diverse. Diversity is the death knell to the Republican Party, and it's the death knell to Trump and Trump's agenda. He does not appreciate people of color. He does not appreciate young people. He does not want to see diverse communities rise. He does not want to see the economy that is growing across Milwaukee. He does not want to give strength to that city, what it means for the state of Wisconsin, and the fact that the convention that is going to be nominating him is actually being held there. There's a sheer level of disrespect, but it goes beyond Milwaukee to every single urban center in this country, but particularly those that are run by people who are black.
Which is weird because he was just in the South Bronx with rappers on stage. So I'm trying to figure all of this out. Rina, I want to sort of pick up on something that Amicia just pointed out. The RNC, they're having their convention in Milwaukee. This is the very city that's hosting the Republican National Convention a month from today. He is the leader of the party. What is he thinking here? Make it make sense to me, please.
You know, there is not a strategy in Trump world right now, except for whatever Donald Trump is feeling that day of the week. He wants to go ahead and promulgate what's on his mind. And what's on his mind is usually the othering of Americans that are not just new, but of minority communities. Black and brown folks across the country know how he has not only mischaracterized, leaned into stereotypes that are ancient. And this is a person that does not think about what his campaign needs to do right. He is just thinking about what gets to people that misinformation that will maybe get people animated, get them fearful of a changing America that maybe they don't fit into. And what he's also kind of relying on, Charles, inside politics for a moment, is that Wisconsin delegation of Republicans in Congress that for now well over a decade and a half pledged allegiance to him. There was a former RNC chair, Reince Priebus, from there, members of Congress that have all had this fealty to Trump, pledged, again, allegiance to a man. So it's Wisconsin Republicans that can be blamed for helping create Trumpism, helping push it forward in the party. And he has a very narrow vision. He's not thinking straight, and he's kind of going right for that, again, hate to say it, red meat of going for that changing America, an America that doesn't fit in for folks who are white.
But Rina, for a moment, just talk to me about what does this do? What does it mean for down ballot candidates in his own party who are in purple districts or light red districts and still need to get elected or reelected when he pulls a stunt like this a month before their national convention?
Yeah, it's a moment again in which it highlights how every man is for themselves in the races that they're in. When you're in a tough district, which Donald Trump did not win. I'm talking about several members of Congress who are part of the GOP caucus of the House in particular. They know that they're left to their own devices, whether it's for fundraising, whether you're looking for support. They can't call this guy into the district. I mean, he's terrible for them. So again, it's just a moment that doesn't really jive with how I don't want to say retail politics is done, just decency. I mean, there was a time where the party, you get together, you talk about unity, you put forward a more hopeful agenda for the country. You start to talk about what you're for instead of what you're against. That's all been flipped on its head. So again, these folks in purple districts are they're abandoned. That's what they are, simply put.
Amicia, you're a D&I practitioner, and so you teach people about microaggressions all the time. The following phrase is one that I'm sure you've had come up in different workshops. I can't be racist because all of my friends are black, gay, queer, Hispanic, Latino, from another planet, have 3 arms, disabled, whatever the group is. So Donald Trump is starting this new coalition for basically blacks for Trump in America. And he said, quote, I have so many black friends that if I were a racist, they wouldn't be my friends. They would not be with me for 2 minutes, maybe 1, but 2 minutes if they thought I was a racist. Can you please explain for our audience how deeply problematic this logic is?
Well, it is deeply problematic and it's frustrating. And to your point, you'll be hard pressed to find somebody who does not have racial animus who has not made a statement like that. There are individuals who often say, well, my black friend, and that black friend is typically someone who is not a friend to the black community, all skin folk and kinfolk. Those same people are actually supporting laws and policies that restrict access for black people in employment, in higher education, in small business ownership and things like that. There are black people who are not friends to the black community. The individuals who stand by the Republican Party who happen to be LGBT, who are watching the expansion of book bans, who are watching the restrictions on access for LGBT people and their, and just being able to pursue love, to pursue family. And that's coming out of the Republican Party that they stand behind and stand in lockstep with. So it is not uncommon, unfortunately, to see individuals who have animus towards racial groups or against LGBT groups and things like that, to also say that they have friends within those cohorts. But I would question those friends, because if you pull back that layer, those friends are typically people who also align with being anti-LGBT, anti-black, who themselves, if you put the mirror on them, are reflective of the community, but they're not reflective of the values or the policies that will move that community forward. They are oftentimes self-hating. And they oftentimes are people who are actively fighting against their own self-interest.
Amicia, tonight we're going to see the president going out into Los Angeles and having a fundraiser with some big names, Barack Obama, George Clooney, and Jimmy Kimmel among them. Is there any concern that something like this only plays into the trope that Democrats are elitists and basically not concerned with the common man in America?
One of the most working class cities in America, all the working class cities in America that I can think of are within the Midwest. Milwaukee is one of the strongest. So for Donald Trump to say the things that he said about the city of Milwaukee, that was a direct attack on working class people. I think that in any administration, in any campaign, you're going to see fundraising tactics that are small donor as well as large donor. We know that for the Biden campaign, the overwhelming majority of his fundraising swaths have come from small dollar donations. That means that everyday Americans are giving to the Biden campaign and giving on a monthly basis, recurring donations. This is no different than any other campaign where you are working to build your, to build your base across multiple different sectors. The Democrats, especially under this president, have had a very strong relationship with people across multiple areas of the entertainment industry. That's not new. Democrats have always had those relationships. And previously, we saw some Republican presidents who had it as well. Because Donald Trump stands for what he stands for, he typically pulls some of the most denigrated and low-hanging fruit of those who happen to be, of the celebrity status that everybody has kind of pushed to the side. So they're like, C-list, D-list celebrities. But he's tried to bring those on as well in terms of fundraising. But I don't think that this does anything to diminish President Biden. He's playing all of the angles he can, and he has to, because this is a very competitive race, but he's also very strategic in understanding that his fundraising haul is 4 times that of the RNC and of former President Trump, and that train is just going to keep on rolling.
Amisha Cross and Rena Shaw, thank you both for being here.